It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Rabbit Hole Radio. I am your host, Popeye, and it is March 5th, 2022. Tonight, I'm going to be getting into the Russia versus Ukraine situation, talking about some of the stuff that's gone on in the past between them, the levels of propaganda that are being pumped out. I'm not taking sides. I'm just going to point out my observations on everything. And actually here to join me, I have a special guest co-host with me tonight. And he's one of the favorites here on Rabbit Hole Radio. And again, one of my oldest, in fact, actually he is the oldest and longest running co-host I've ever had whenever I do shows and I have a co-host or a guest co-host or I do something like a collaboration. He is the longest running collaborator, I'll say, that I've ever had the pleasure of working with and knowing and being friends with. And he is like a brother to me. So who could I be talking about? Ladies and gentlemen, of course, you all know Mr. Steve Stars. Steve, welcome back yet again, my brother.
Wow, it's a great introduction. We want to follow it up. I hope I don't let everybody down. I'm sure we won't. We got a great program tonight for everybody, Popeye, and it's always been a pleasure working with you. And I don't know whether this is the time, but I took a look at your new website, and it is dynamite, ladies and gentlemen. You got to go see it. All the old archives of the old shows are going up. All those great interviews. Is it time to promote that yet? I mean, I'm going to give you a shameless plug, Popeye, because you really did a great job with this.
Oh, thank you, Steve. And I want to thank my buddy, as we call him, the Reverend Dr. Proxy. He is a hacker and a programmer extraordinaire, and he built me a very interesting website. Steve was just mentioning it. I just got it literally live a couple days ago, and I've been like auto uploading things from another computer for the past couple of days because stuff takes a little while to upload from out here in the country. And it's cool. It's up at about, I think the 21 episodes are up there right now. It's all the Rabbit Hole Radio episodes, and I'm making like videos for them since I don't do video and I'm stuck out in the country. And I'm throwing it up there with some video. Like sometimes you'll see video come up on the screen of things I'm talking about. So it gives it a little bit more reference. I would usually do that with like OBS, and I would just pipe that stream to Bill, and then Bill would work his programmer magic and make it appear on everybody's screens worldwide like he does. He's a radio wizard in the background. Big Jedi bow and thank you to Mr. Bill in the background for all he does for this network. He really makes everyone's shows run super smooth, and he's the reason why everybody's shows come in and out of break nice and sound smooth, and the audio is always level. It's because Bill's an audiophile like me, and he's in the background forever going over stuff going, wait, I could tweak it a little bit more. So thank you, Bill, for all you do. Appreciate you, brother. So, Steve, let's get into the craziness. Oh, I should probably, wait, how about we do?
Yes.
Let me throw the website out there.
Yes.
I almost forgot the web address. It's tv.rabbithole.radio. tv.rabbithole.radio, and you can go check out the website there, and I'll advertise it more during the show. That's my brain. I try to keep myself on track because one day, ladies and gentlemen, I will sit down and explain before I have surgery. I'll take probably like a good 10 minutes to try to explain in a radio format to make it easy to understand in an audio fashion or audio format as to why I sometimes screw up words or something. I told you I had a bad car accident, so my brain's a little jacked up, and I have to have, and so's my neck, and I have to have kind of an extensive surgery at some point down the road. Good thing is I'll get better Wi-Fi, I hear, out in the country, and I think maybe I'll be able to get a Starlink implant just put right into it. So there's that. I mean, you never know. I got to tell you, we could start off there with Ukraine. Elon Musk, as a whole, he did a great thing. He threw an entire truckload of Starlink dishes towards Ukraine's way because their internet and things were getting cut off, their communication lines. And he set up Starlink. He had the satellites redirected over there to bring them the internet, made sure everything was, up and running for them. and he refuses. He also refuses credit to him. He refuses to censor Russia from using it because everyone's canceling Russia. Cancel culture now comes to the world stage. Like this is like the first time, even in wars in the past. You couldn't do business with this person or that person or whatever. But I mean, we're one step away from starting to round up Russians here in the United States and throwing them in internment camps. We're literally canceling everything that could be Russian. It's ridiculous. We'll get into that too.
Right.
There's a lot of stupidity going on. It's really dumb, which is, it's kind of scary because we're that whole like social justice warrior stupidity is now being exported worldwide. And, whether or not you like Russia or not, Putin don't play that. Like he's not about that. He's not he thinks, and he's referenced how like the weak Western culture or how Western culture has made men weak here in the United States before. Like they pay attention to that. They're not dumb. We look like a bunch of morons as it is. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff to get into, but I want to start with Starlink. So Musk threw them satellite dishes, and got them running, and I'll give him credit because he won't silence Russia either. People are trying to get them to cancel Russia and, like not allow Russia to use. He's like, no, people, I believe that I'm a free speech absolutist is what he said on Twitter today. Mm-hmm. And I support him for that. That's whether you agree with him. I don't agree with Musk on every little thing he ever says or does or whatever, but there's a reason, the guy, when he says things like that, I support it. Well, there's a reason, that he says that he kind of, I guess he's, I don't know if he's on the spectrum or not, but he's very blunt, but I don't know, in an Elon Musk sort of way. He's kind of an alien, I think. I think he's like an alien in a human suit. He's the dude's beyond his time. But I agree with a lot of the stuff that he's actually been saying lately. I'm kind of surprised he's been calling out a lot of the I mean, he's a billionaire, so he could say whatever he wants, I guess. Right. But he's been saying things that you wouldn't expect someone of his level to say. I mean, I don't think that trust me, I don't think he's going to come out as the new Q, Steve. I don't think anything like that. Of course, he's a billionaire, so he would know. I mean, he knows. If he can't get to the level he's at and not know more than you think he
absolutely.
Can. He knows more than you think he does, for sure. Right. But I mean, I think it's cool that he sent the Ukrainian people the dishes. And then I think on the other hand, it's also cool that he won't censor Russia. I don't think it's cool that I've been waiting almost 2 years for my Starlink dish, though.
Yeah. That's taking a while.
Just kidding.
Yeah, no, he'll be moving his way. That's very soon, of course. And I've seen some of these huge launches. I think I've seen 3 of them where, the satellites are launched as many as 60 or 70 at a time. And it's kind of ominous. I am not a big follower or believer to a large extent in all this SATCOM stuff that's going on right now. My son, it's oddly enough, Popeye is working for a company. He was actually working for Lockheed for a while as a coder, and they called him in on the satellite or the landing, Perseverance landing after he had left Lockheed because they needed him to do some coding and stuff like that. He's working with a company right now that's trying to keep these satellites from bumping into each other. So he's got this huge map of all these satellites wherever they are. They're always changing orbits. They don't expect many of them to hit, but they can and have. And so they're trying to keep them away from space junk and stuff like this because the entire, low orbit, revolving area out there is really getting crowded. So anyway, enough about that. We're kind of getting off the topic, but
no, I'm glad you bring up the satellites and space because that's another thing. I've seen a lot of information out there that, they're worried about Russia using hunter-killer satellites. And it's funny, they don't literally call them hunter-killer satellites, but that's what they're talking about. And yes. You're like, wait, what are you talking about, hunter-killer satellites? I thought that kind of stuff didn't exist, and we were conspiracy theorists for mentioning that kind of stuff 10 or 15 years ago. And they were putting that stuff up in the 70s. Right. They were launching these hunter-killer satellites. Now, like filmmakers, like Christopher Everard, good friend. I've had him on before, and we've talked about it on his broadcast that he's done. He's been on a couple of different networks over the years, and he does podcasting and stuff still, I think. And every time Everard said that they put them up to hunt down UFOs. I don't know if they put them up. They could do both. All sure. I know is in the 70s they put hunter-killer satellites up there, and the government admits they did. They say it was to battle the Soviets. Now, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but now you hear them saying that's an actual concern, that the Soviets could use a hunter-killer satellite and start taking out American satellites in space. Right. And they're talking about like Star Wars. But it's funny because when Trump announced, let me rephrase that. When the Space Force was announced under Trump, people made fun of it, and they made fun of Trump. Oh, he's making his own. That's never going to last. He's making his own branch of the military. He can't do that. He didn't do that. No. He didn't have it. He didn't do that. He just happened to be in that position, in that seat, when Space Force came into the public limelight and officially became another branch of the armed forces.
That's right. And they're all along.
What about Gary McKinnon, the guy that got the hacker that got arrested for busting into the Pentagon years and years and years ago? I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s he got busted, and he supposedly, because this was, like dot matrix printers, going with the spool with the that had the paper that was fed with the two gears with the teeth on it, and it had the paper had the holes on the side of it, and it would slowly pull it up, and it would, take like 6 years to print out a page. He was trying to print out an image, okay, and he supposedly hacked into the Pentagon and found images of like their Space Force back in the day, we'll say, and it was images of things like the Solar Warden program. Now there's like artist rendering of what McKinnon supposedly says he saw, and you can go look at those renderings and check it out. I don't know if that's real, but then he talked about that for years. If you even remotely brought that up, you were a crazy UFO weirdo. What are you, one of those guys? You live in your mom's basement with your tinfoil hat, and the old stupid meme they used to try to weave around that, and they would throw that at you. And here now, fast forward to the future of today, and Space Force is a thing. And when it first came out, they kind of laughed at it because Trump was in office. If Hillary Clinton was in office, they wouldn't have laughed at it. They would have called it dynamic. Look, she broke the ceiling literally and made Space Force. Now they're out. I can already hear the propaganda. I don't even work for them, and I know their BS so well that I could literally spew it for them. It's disgusting. Oh, look, she broke the glass ceiling around the Earth, and now we have Space Force. Hillary Clinton. It'd be great. It'd be awesome. But Trump did it, so it was silly. But now that Biden's in office, and they're actually literally talking about, they're worried that Russia could take out our satellites. This is like, year and a half, 2 years later. So you see how fast things change. That Space Force and space warfare was already going on. Russia didn't just put these satellites up like 2 weeks ago.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, no. Yeah, they've been out there for quite some time. And we witnessed what happened in the Black Sea, if you recall, back a few years ago when the USS Donald Cook was buzzed and flybyed by a couple of newer of the Russian fighters, and they had no idea where they were coming from. Their radar was completely jammed. These jets flew about 30 feet above the decks and waved, and they made a big issue out of this. And when the Donald Cook, when they finally docked into their port, I think it was in Greece or someplace, the officers resigned. They said, we're not going to go out there in the Red Sea anymore. We are completely outgunned by their radar and everything. We were lost. We would have been toast without a clue. Russia is far advanced right now, ladies and gentlemen, in not just in economics issues concerning their ability to lock themselves down, Popeye, from outside influence. They can suffer the hits of all of these, these
sanctions. Well, that's
right.
Okay, so good segue because And the reason I brought the Space Force thing up is because we were talking about satellites, and that is a concern. Now, whether or not Russia's really going to do that, I don't know. It is a capability that they do have. I'm just pointing that out. And if you poke the bear, so to speak, enough, right, you're going to piss it off. It might actually try to lash out at you. And if you isolate somebody, which we're doing like everything that you shouldn't do to push a country into war, the entire world seems to be doing, aside from a few countries, and is doing to Russia. And it's cutting, unprecedented. It's getting cut off from everything. People are like, well, don't you support it? No, actually I don't, because that's the worst thing you could do is isolate that country, because now you're giving it really no reasons to give a crap about striking out and taking things to another level. Duh.
Right.
Duh.
Popeye, how about this comment from Lindsey Graham? Can you imagine this? He thinks somebody should assassinate Putin. Really? And the next guy...
Illegal? Isn't that illegal, though?
But think of the logic.
It's the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. These are the kinds of threats that come out of an idiot's mouth. And I'm sure that whoever takes Putin's place will be a nicer guy, and the Russians won't be mad at all about that. Like, that's really going to solve the problem. I'd say maybe it's better to take out a guy by the name of George Soros if you really want to get to the root of the problem, because I think most of all of this is hyped up. He always, with his open source or open society foundation, you know what I mean? His whole thing about stirring up trouble. Have you seen any riots from Antifa or Black Lives Matter since the election?
Of course not.
Oh, well, why not? I guess things are all better now, right?
Everyone's too busy changing the color of their profile to blue and yellow right now to support Ukraine. Yeah, they can't focus on anything else, Steve. You're asking too many. First of all, you're asking too many people to handle two things at once. How dare you, Steve?
Right. Well, see, the point is, where did all that money come from? He claims he doesn't agitate these kinds of things, and we're going to prove to you. I got the information, and I know that Popeye does too, talking about what's going to happen and what has happened since 2014 when Soros got involved in the whole Maiden Orange Revolution, and how this thing all of a sudden started to get even worse from that period on. What was it, 13 to 14,000 people on the border have been killed?
Well, there was a CIA-backed coup.
That's right.
And then they installed, at the time,
Poroshenko, wasn't it?
CIA, New World Order controlled puppets. You can say U.S. Everyone always likes to say U.S. because it's the U.S. government that technically does this stuff. But imagine, so the Uncle Sam figure that I have on as the federaljack.com logo that goes back years and years and years. It's the shadowy Uncle Sam figure with the two puppets, Republicans and Democrats. Well, that Uncle Sam figure in and of itself is almost like a puppet itself, or a costume. And it's not actually the U.S. government. The government is being used. And when the U.S. government, when the United States and the people of the United States of America cease to be of use to the people that are doing this, they will move on to China. China was a long time ago picked to be the new head of the next version of the New World Order, like we were for during the, since World War II up to present day. And we're, our way of doing things and getting things done has run its course. Right. And now that's why everybody suddenly over the years, and we like the way China does things. And how many U.S. politicians have embraced how China does things with the internet, or this or that? And they love China. We love China. We love China. China is suddenly super powerful. So, and it's not that they haven't built their own economy up and stuff. They have, but there's a reason that things like that happen. You start to do some research, you realize that this was decided a long time ago. The U.S. has run its course, and they are now running what's left is this country into the meat grinder. That's why they don't care. People are like, I don't get it. It's like they don't care. They don't. You don't get it. They don't care. They think, people like Pelosi and all them, they think that they're part of the in crowd. They'll be surprised that if they get what they really want or what they're trying to push for, their agenda that they want, that when they're done, when they've run their useful course, they will be lined up against the wall and shot by whatever monstrosity of a government that they've brought in. It's happened throughout history. Whenever anyone that helps these totalitarian dictatorships come into power, and they help them, achieve their goals, the first thing that they do is round up everybody that worked for them and kill them.
Right.
Because they know that they're dangerous and that they know too much, so they got to go. They purge them. They did it to the brown shirts. The Nazis did it. The Bolsheviks did it. It's happened time and time and time and time again. So let's not pretend like that wouldn't happen again. So those people, they're useful idiots. That's when you hear me refer to somebody as a useful idiot, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I'm talking about. They're somebody that's got something that they can bring to the table that can be of use to further the agenda. But at the end of the day, they will be thrown to the side, even if they're millionaires.
Right.
I mean, the people that really run things they print the money. They actually control the printing presses. That Pelosi and all them don't do that. They worship the money that is given to them. That's why they're willing to sell you and me and everybody else out for $1, because they get the right amount of money to do it. And it makes them feel better because they worship. Just like in the movie They Live, Steve, when Piper puts on the sunglasses,
right?
He's looking around and he sees the signs, and it says obey, consume, procreate, and then he takes the glasses off and he's like, whoa, and he looks at the magazines, and the magazines all have the same kind of slogans on it. And then one of the customers at the magazine stand that he's standing at has money in his hand, and the money says, "This is your God," on the money. And if that doesn't tell you something, and Piper admitted before his death, later on, years later, he died a couple years back now, probably like 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer than that, probably like 8 or 9. Yeah, at least like 8 or 9 years ago now. And he had said that, seeing what was going on in the world, after he had made that movie years ago in the 80s. And if you haven't seen They Live, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great film. Yeah, I suggest you go see it. It's by John Carpenter. Very good film. And it's actually, if you watch it now, you'll be like, oh my God, we're living in that right now.
Right.
And Piper said it was like being in a documentary more or less. Anyway, so getting back into Ukraine, and we can use that allegory of the They Live, where in the movie they were using a signal to mask their identity, the aliens or interdimensional beings, whatever they were. They made themselves look like humans to us in the movie by using a signal that our brains picked up on, and they were able to imprint onto it. And that tells you about frequency and other things, which we've discussed, but whole side issue. So getting back into it, if you use that kind of allegory, that signal seems to be going out now, Steve. If you look at Ukraine, I mean, in the past 2 weeks, let's get into the canceling of Russia. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not taking sides, because this is all part of the agenda. Like 5 or 6 weeks ago, I had Scott and Joe from the Freedom Link on, right? We were talking, and I said during the broadcast with them, I have a feeling, everybody's starting to, everyone's over COVID, the restrictions, they're not afraid anymore. They're going to start a war because they got nothing else. And, no one likes Biden. The economy is tanking. Inflation's flying out through the roof. Everyone's blaming Biden. They need a war. They need a war. Yeah. They need a war. That's their end all be all answer for everything is war. So they're going to start one, or they'll fight. They'll fan the flames, or they'll entice, or you could just kind of feel it. And I was just like, I have a feeling they're going to start a war. They're going to do something. And I'm watching all of this go on. And I mean, I have my own theory on it, and we can get into the theories on it afterwards. But I want to cover the propaganda for a minute. So the level of propaganda you see is unreal. I'm not saying that it's not heroic for people to stand up for their country and their countrymen and lay their arms down, or lay their lives down and pick up arms, I should say, and fight an invader. I mean, I would do that. You would do that, Steve. A lot of people would do that. I know Sure. Bill would do that. Oh, yeah. But there's like a movie quality feeling to this.
Scripting is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's almost, I mean, Wag the Dog comes to mind. I know the war is real. I know in Wag the Dog, the war was fake and it was completely fake. But in this case, there's still like I want to say Wag the Dog-esque type feel to it, where there's a level of propaganda, and there's always propaganda in war. I mean, when we went into Iraq, it was, the first time it was the Iraq incubator babies. Remember that lie?
Right.
They had that I forget, the guy was, and her father ended up being in the government, but they had this little girl, in case you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, in the first Gulf War, when Papa Bush was the president, they had this little girl. I think she spoke at the UN, if I remember correctly, and it ended up being some politician or a government official's daughter. And she was like, they're throwing babies. They took I witnessed it. They took the baby out of the incubator, meaning the Iraqi military took babies out of incubators and tossed them on the ground and stomped them and smashed their skulls and their heads in and killed them. And she said this. It was either at the UN or Congress. I can't remember exactly right now off the top of my head where she said it, but it was the Iraq. If you just Google Iraq incubator babies, you'll see what I'm talking about. It was BS. It was horseshit. It was fake. It wasn't real. It turned out to be a lie, but it was one of the reasons that they justified attacking another country. And then it was, and then in 2003, it was, they have WMDs. Oh, they don't have WMDs. Whoops. No,
that's right.
No WMDs here. Can't find them over here. I mean, George Bush actually made a joke. Look up. I don't know if you can find the video. It's probably gone, but see if you can find it on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a challenge. I love to do this, Steve, to the listeners. Whenever you hear this broadcast, if you're listening to it either live here on KGRA or you hear it in a replay or whatever, go on YouTube when you hear this, and you can look up like Iraq incubator babies, look up WMDs, and look up George Bush jokes about weapons of mass destruction, or George Bush jokes about not finding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or you can Google it, the video or something will come up. He actually joked about it. I think it was at one of those, what do they call that, where they joke with the press
type things.
Yeah, it was like
those weapons of mass destruction must be around here somewhere,
Yeah, I forget. It's not I forget what they call it. It's like they do it once a year. It's some sort of like state dinner or whatever, and they all get together. It's the press and the president, and he jokes with them and everything, and it's all ha 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 ha. And he was making jokes about the not finding a weapons of mass destruction. It's ha ha ha. It's not funny, bro. You killed over 1 million people died as a result of the war in Iraq. I'm not talking about our people. I'm talking about Iraqis. 1 million. Well, they fought back. They were terrorists. No, they weren't terrorists. Yeah, I mean, am I a veteran? Yes. Am I happy that my brothers and sisters were maimed or killed? No. But the people, and yes, there were terrorists. In many cases, there were bad guys in some cases. But in a lot of cases, we were also fighting people that were fighting for their homeland. So I pose this to you, everybody out there that's got a gun and believes in the Second Amendment, right? And or either you're a vet, you were whatever, you've got a firearm, right? Everyone says if Red Dawn ever happened and Russians ever come here, I'd show Russia, I'd kick Putin's ass myself. I round up that Ruski's ass 100 yards. They don't want to mess with America's Second Amendment. Gun behind every blade of grass, right? Right. So that's no different than who we were fighting in Iraq. So then when you look at it that way, you have to say to yourself, wow, so wait, I had more in common with the people we were fighting than the people that sent us to go fight there?
Right.
Then that really leads you down a different path and a different way of thinking, right? It's poor men die in rich men's wars. And all wars are bankers' wars because they're the only people that make any benefit from any of this, whether it be politically because they get things that they want, or people have to actually take loans from them, countries. They have to borrow money. Now, like Steve said, Russia has set itself up uniquely that it doesn't have to do that. It's got its economy is not massive. Its economy is probably about the size of Spain's, but they can sustain themselves economically to a certain degree.
Yeah.
They can bear hardship. For how long, that's to be seen. But they also have partnerships with China that they don't need they don't need to import anything from other countries, and China can import stuff from them, and they can do trade back and forth. So they can import and export things back and forth. And I mean, it may not be the same level of commerce that maybe they were doing if everybody was buying stuff from them, but it would be enough to sustain them. They don't need our economy. Okay. They stopped buying dollars years ago. They started dumping the American petrodollar as reserve currency because that's what they use. They use the American dollar is used worldwide as a reserve currency. And Russia and China are dumping it, especially Russia. They're dumping it. And you got to wonder, are we playing a game with them to drag them into a war to make them do something? Are they trying to corner Putin? This isn't the first time they've done that either. You know, in World War II, Steve, they did the same thing. They cornered the Japanese, and the Japanese ended up bombing Pearl Harbor. A lot of people don't know that. Look, I'm a sailor. Right? I was in the Coast Guard. Pearl Harbor is a honored place. It's like a holy place to sailors for the amount of people that are still buried inside those ships that are at the bottom of the harbor. Okay. It's like, it's a shrine or to their bodies and to what happened. Okay. People go there to, pay homage to them and to pray almost. It's almost like it's a very spiritual experience, like even being near that and being over the Arizona. Okay. So like that place is very special, and I hold that place sacred. So I would never, ever disparage it or be disrespectful to it. But we goaded, let me rephrase that. Hold on, let me rephrase that. Not we. Our government officials, through actions taken before Pearl Harbor, goaded Japan into attacking us, and the Japanese did. We went after them economically, and they kept saying, if you keep doing this, we're going, and you force us. We were messing around with oil and, do the same type of things that we do now with sanctions. We were doing it back then, and we forced them. We forced their hand. They said, you're going to make us do this. Don't. And they taunted them. Now, I'm not saying the Japanese are off the hook for what they did back in the day. I mean, currently they did. The current Japanese people are. They didn't do anything, but the Japanese government at the time, they're not off the hook for attacking us, right? They attacked us. But the point is, the government at the time taunted them until they felt they had no choice, and they knew what they were doing. When our government knew what they were doing. Okay. And then when they knew that the Armada was coming over here, they looked the other way. And they let them attack Pearl Harbor because they needed an excuse. The day before Pearl Harbor, nobody in America really wanted to get involved in World War II. World War I was too much of a meat grinder. We lost too many people. The country suffered too much. Nobody wanted a repeat. So the answer was no. The people weren't for it. So how did they get the people to be for it? Because the day after Pearl Harbor, Steve, 1 million men signed up to join the United States military and fight the Japanese. Not even to mention going to get sent over to fight the Nazis.
And that's why Dick Cheney called what we needed the PNAC meeting a new Pearl Harbor. We needed a new Pearl Harbor. And, it's funny because when I was watching things on 9/11, not knowing what was going on, I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, this reminds me of like a new Pearl Harbor. what's happening right now. We're going into a new war, and this is the big attack that's going to set it off. And I had some queasy feelings about it at that time, Popeye. I knew something wasn't quite right, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I'm seeing the same idiotic flag waving right now in support of these poor Ukrainians. Ladies and gentlemen, these Ukrainians do not need a war at all, at all. I think the best option for them, and I'm going to be controversial, a lot of people aren't going to like it, but I'm going to say they should surrender, say we made a mistake. Soros agitated all of this. Yeah, that's right. That's what happened. You got into trouble. You kept poking the bear. Putin put his foot down. He said, this is it. We are not going to have NATO missiles on our border. And we could talk about that a little bit. These are very highly and very fast-moving tactical nukes that they're trying to put on the border. I think it was John F. Kennedy who said a long time ago that he had the same problem with Russia wanting to put missiles in Cuba for the very same reason. And while you're on the subject there, that you talked about with Iraq, we went halfway around the world to fight a war and bomb the hell out of people in Iraq over weapons of mass destruction that never existed. Friends, these are real missiles being put on the border by NATO, and Putin's not going to allow it. He talked about what happened with Operation Barbarossa when they tolerated Hitler in Russia, and all of a sudden there was this unprovoked attack that rolled right into Russia. It took millions of lives to put a stop to that. Russians were killed by the millions, putting a stop to what was going on with Hitler when he invaded without warning. Putin has said this himself. We cannot afford to make that mistake again. Now, the second issue, of course, is the sanctions. He doesn't like the sanctions. As I understand, people are driving to liquor stores to buy Russian vodka, which isn't Russian vodka, to pour it out, but the gas they're buying is from Russia. They're paying if you look at the gas prices, some of that gasoline and oil is coming from Russia right now. Germany has to rely on the gas. They're paying for all of this. Everything, all these sanctions.
This is as stupid as freedom fries.
Yeah,
this is
as
as dumb as the freedom fries thing when the French didn't want to get involved in invading Iraq in 2003. And we were like, we're not going to call them French fries anymore. We're going to rename them freedom fries.
Right.
Yes. And for those of you that don't know, that happened.
That
cringy, retarded, idiotic stupidity actually happened. And all over the country, people were like, let's get freedom fries. The French. There's no weapons of mass destruction? What? Oh, the war was illegal. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Now,
we should just turn all those, we should just change it back to French fries. We'll just call those French fries again and forget we ever called them freedom fries or supported the Iraq invasion. It's amazing. All the people that supported it and were flag waving for it suddenly lost their support for it when the reality came hitting home later on. And it took years in many cases. And it's the same thing. It's going to happen here. Look, why is it suddenly, and I'm not bashing the Ukrainian people. I feel bad for the Ukrainian people.
We're trying to save them from this disaster.
I feel bad for the Ukrainian people as a whole. Now, right now, I know their president, Zelensky, he's being like held up as some sort of hero. He's not it's not like we're projecting what we think. We're projecting our version of what our president is, which isn't even real. Okay. Let me rephrase that. People are projecting the version of the president that has been programmed into them here in America onto a foreign president. And that is largely in part because the media is propagandizing you to do that. And the programming is that he's a hero and his people love him. And some of the pictures that you're seeing of him in fatigues are from like months before or a year ago when he went and was visiting the Ukrainian troops that were fighting the separatists in the areas that Russia first put troops into, the contested areas. Right. And you can say what you want, okay? You can run around and throw around, the ghost of Kiev, that was fake. Okay. That was fake. That turned out, for those of you that don't know, the ghost of Kiev was supposedly this Ukrainian fighter pilot that in the first night flew around and took out five Russian jets making him a fighter ace, like I think the fastest fighter ace ever in combat. And turns out, no, it was fake. And the video, the supposed video footage that was shared worldwide by mainstream media of him was from a video game. It was not real. It was fake. Then they were saying that, Russia was invading with their full force, and it was, you see planes flying overhead, and it turns out it was from years and years before that somebody had recorded it. And, there's a lot of fake stuff that's coming out. Now, people are going to say, well, why? Well, I mean, some people are trolls. Some people are just trying to get clicks. Maybe they're not living in the Ukraine, but they make an account and they're just trying to get hits. I don't know. Some people live for that. It's a serotonin, rush for them in their brain. A lot of that propaganda that was put out by the intelligence communities. I really don't think that the large portion of propaganda out there is coming out from, again, some kid in his basement. Wherever that basement may be, doesn't matter what the geographic location is. I don't think it's a kid in his basement. I think it's an intelligence community putting that kind of stuff out. In this day and age, you don't even need that. You'll get somebody that might throw something fake out, and the media jumps all over it, because Twitter seems to be where you get your news stories from nowadays. I guess if you're in the mainstream, you just go to Twitter and read people's Twitter feeds, Steve, and that's the new mainstream media sourcing
it's a media war. It's a media war here. There are now reports, of course, that many of these locales that they're hitting are biolabs. They had a lot of biolabs. At first, I was relatively not wanting to take this information to heart until I had verification. But there were biolabs that they were putting in this location. Friends, this comedian, this actor who became president, he's kind of like the Jimmy Kimmel president. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about here. But he's better than our idiot, who Putin looks at videos of him and laughs, just really, embarrassingly saying, I can't believe that this guy is the president of the United States I have to deal with. But what had happened there for so long, Popeye, was that, this original fellow who was there, that Viktor Yanukovych, I guess, was democratically elected. But this whole thing went south, and they basically overthrew the government in 2014. Then you had Poroshenko. He was the one that was doing the bribes. Remember that, with Joe Biden boasting about how he bribed that government? Paul Pelosi, Hunter Biden, both were involved with Burisma, friends. There was all kinds of corruption flowing through Kyiv. And is that right? they spell it so many different ways these days. But
so it used to be pronounced Kiev.
Kiev, yeah.
And I remember growing up, it was always Kiev.
Yeah,
chicken Kiev.
I think it is KY.
Now they're calling it Kiev, and they're saying that's the way they say it. That's the Ukrainian, the new Ukrainian way of saying it, or the way it's supposed to be said. And, the other way is the Russian way. So we don't say it that way anymore, because they started, Tina and I asked that. We were talking about it when all this first started going on. I was like, why do they keep calling it Kyiv? They're mispronouncing it.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, what the hell? And then I was like, oh my God, what they're trying to do. I realized what they're doing. Like the light bulb went off, and they're changing. You know how they change words on a smaller scale? It's the cancel culture thing. So like on a smaller scale, they change the way that they say a word or the definition of a word. Well, now they're literally changing the pronunciation of it. They're canceling Kiev because it's Russian, and they're promoting literally. We're not going to call Latinos or Latinas, because the Spanish culture, that's what the Latin culture, that's what it has a masculine and a feminine to it. And that's just the way that culture is with the language. Right. Well, and now the New World Order agenda pushers, that's where they're trying to push Latinx or some people pronounce it Latinx, but they say Latinx instead of Latino or Latina. Well, it's the same thing. Instead of saying Kiev, now you have to cancel the Russian in the name. So you have to call it Kyiv, and program people to keep calling it Kyiv, and then you get enough people to keep calling it Kyiv, and eventually, over the years, people will forget that it was called Kiev. And ladies and gentlemen, if you think that sounds crazy, It's not crazy.
No. No
It's
wonder I
not
was
at all. You're
confused.
seeing it
Yeah.
live
Yeah. It's
going
happening
on right now.
Yep. Newspeak. It's called Newspeak. They're changing everything, cancel culture. But when you consider what has happened there, now, let's just look at a comparison for just a minute, though, Pop. I think about this. All right. What does Kyiv have to gain from all of this? I mean, okay, so they don't want to put missiles and from NATO in there. They don't need an alliance with NATO, which has been expanding all over that region since the 40s and 50s when it first came out originally. Do we need another NATO nation? They've been doing pretty well, and they can make a lot of money funneling supplies and materials such as Gazprom and Nord Stream and some of these others. They've got a lot of potential to make a lot of money trading between East and West right now. Do they really need
pounding ISIS with us side by side? They were hitting ISIS targets. We were working with the Russian military in Syria, which is kind of weird because we were funding ISIS and then we were
and who took out ISIS
at the same time. That's kind of weird.
Right. And Putin was the one that took out ISIS, not Trump, ladies and gentlemen.
Russia kicked the crap at it because, our government was funding it and he knew that. So Russia went in and just mopped the floor with them. And I mean, the Russian military is more formidable. That's why a lot of what I see, like when you see these columns of tanks and armored vehicles being destroyed, and they're like, the Ukrainian military is taking them out in strategic hits. And I'm like, where's the video? Picture it didn't happen. Because I can tell you, there's more cell phones now than there has ever been, right? More cameras floating around, right? And internet connections and all this other stuff. And yet I saw more videos coming out from the Iraq war and from Afghanistan from years ago before people had the capabilities that they have now to upload stuff. Like people, back then you'd find videos that people had somehow shot on a digital camera, somehow uploaded on their crappy satellite internet from the middle of the desert, and got up on the internet or whatever. And you could still see, I don't see, and people are like, what are you talking about? There's tons of video. No, there's not. You're seeing mainstream sourced video or stuff that supposedly is coming out of the Ukraine. I'm not saying that there's not a war going on. I totally believe there's a war going on. They don't need the fake war. They need the death and destruction. It helps push the whole narrative. Oh yeah. And it helps push the agenda. And it gets rid of people. Because remember, they're all about culling people too. They love that. They love sacrifice and death and the energy released in it. They're sick individuals. So yeah,
it's that military industrial complex that we were talking about, Popeye. Look at Lindsey Graham. He's right in the pocket of all of that. He's calling for an assassination of Putin, and that's going to solve things.
How is that legal? Can I ask a question? How is it legal that a sitting politician openly on social media, like publicly, calls for the assassination of another world leader? And it just goes by, no one cares.
It's because insanity in our nation today, Popeye, it's legal. Look at it. I mean, look at how stupid we've become listening to the news media. Look at what we're buying into. We're going into another damn war to go and stick our nose in the business of somebody else. Let's see. Have we done that before? Didn't we do that in Vietnam? Didn't we do that during the Gulf War? Didn't we do that in Afghanistan? Why would anyone trust us? Look how we betrayed Libya and Gaddafi. Look at what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq and Vietnam. Do you really think they want us to Iraq? Yeah.
A lot of people don't know, but like after 9/11, Saddam Hussein offered, he said, my intelligence services will work with you and let's rout out terrorism in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Because see, what people don't realize without doing any research, Iraq wasn't a hotbed of terrorism, and there wasn't car bombings in Iraq until after we invaded, because Saddam's security forces were so on top of things that just didn't happen because they did their job very efficiently. Whether or not they had brutal techniques, that's neither here nor there. The point is, they didn't have the car bombings and stuff that Iraq suffers, even, not so much. Once in a while, there might be a bombing here or there, but nothing like when it's funny, when we were there is when all the bombing was going on. Once they kicked us out and we were fully out of their backyard, and not in there and up their rear ends the way we were, a lot of that violence stopped. I mean, they had the whole ISIS problem, and people were like, "Oh, aren't you see what happens when you kicked us out?" Gee, that's convenient. That's kind of convenient, isn't it? It's kind of convenient. They kicked us out, and suddenly ISIS was a problem. Huh? Funny how that works, especially when we told them, if you kick us out, ISIS could be a problem. Oh, gee, why? Why? You're going to go let them do things? You're going to go train more foreign fighters to go fight your BS wars? I see what they're doing in Ukraine. I have a feeling that they're trying to drag Putin into a protracted war using the Brzezinski grand chessboard playbook. Because he's the one that boasted about dragging Russia into Afghanistan. Because that's one of the things that really financially devastated Afghanistan was a protracted war in Afghanistan. Oh, really?
Yeah, he certainly funded the resistance, didn't he? We see there are pictures of him with bin Laden. We have pictures of
Brzezinski hanging out with Osama bin Laden. Yeah. And when I say Brzezinski, Steve, do you know he did die? Zbigniew was his first name. Zbigniew Brzezinski. He was like Obama's top foreign policy advisor. As soon as Obama got in, he was the guy that looked like Nosferatu. And he looked like he would come in, he'd float into Obama's office, into the Oval Office, and smile at the cameras, probably drink a little blood before he came in there. His daughter is married to what's his name? Joe Scarborough.
Yeah, that's right.
From
Morning Psycho,
Morning Joe on MSNBC, and they're both presenters of the news, and I say that very loosely, they're propagandists.
Sure. So all of this news is propaganda, ladies and gentlemen. We're not thinking about what's going to really happen to these people in Ukraine by agitating this any further. The smartest thing they could do right now is say, okay, no NATO, we'll continue to allow to do business with you. And the other thing is we'll recognize those regions since most of those people are Russian anyway. Let's all go back to having a real life. That simple solution will not be emerging here. It's a very simple solution. But, Putin is going to expand into Moldova and Romania next. I kind of doubt it. I don't think Putin has any plans to do that right away. Why would he? He saw what happened with Russia when they expanded out too far. Just like you said, in Afghanistan, this was how they caved in. Putin is trying to run a tight ship and a tight economy there. I don't think he has world aspirations. I think he's smart enough to sit there and watch as all these other clowns and stupid people tear things down for themselves. That's what's happening in this country, friends. That's why we're not having these riots with BLM and Antifa anymore. Who was funding all that? Who's been behind?
They're too busy. They're changing the color of their profile pic from where it was the color of solid black to support BLM to blue and yellow now to support the newest cause. Yeah. Because, that's the in thing. I just want to point out that's the NPC programming. Yeah. You know how I always say, Steve, that human brains are like computers? Right. That's the programming.
PC programming.
That's the programming. Look at all the people just instantly changing their stuff. And, oh my God, we need to support Ukraine, Steve. Oh my God, we need to go to war. We need war. We need war. Wait a minute. We just got out of Afghanistan and I thought everybody was happy war was over. But didn't you see what's going on in Ukraine? This is enough. We need to park cruise missiles right into Moscow. Oh yeah, because that would end well. And let me ask you, do you think that China or North Korea or Iran or anyone else that may have a problem with us would maybe feel a little uncomfortable because they just watched Russia get taken out? Do you think that maybe if we had tensions with them, that might make them uncomfortable and make them do something stupid?
Right. Yeah, we don't even want to mess with Russia. They've got the doomsday machine. This is what Putin is trying to explain. You put those missiles on the border with no time and one of them gets loose, you're going to set off a real problem. They have those supersonic gliders. You ought to look at these. Have you seen those? There's a lot to it, Steve. I have to pause this because I see we have about 40 seconds coming up until the break here. But when we get back on the other side, I want to get into a little history of why the provocation. And just I want to put it out there so people know you have a better general understanding as to
what's going on, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into my synopsis and explain what I mean, because I barely just threw it out there. So don't go anywhere,
That's
ladies
good
and
stuff.
gentlemen. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few short minutes. More on Russia and Ukraine and all the propaganda and mind control. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Rabbit Hole Radio. It is March 5th, 2022. We'll get right back into it. Ukraine versus Russia. Hanging out with Steve Stars tonight. Steve, I want to get right back into it because the first hour went by so fast. At the end of the first hour, I had thrown out a little bit of a hypothesis, so to say. And it is that perhaps the powers that shouldn't be, and I'm not Biden,
No.
he couldn't tie his own shoes, not him. Okay, the people that are in a lot of like people like Victoria Nuland and others, right?
Yes.
And you know, their goal, they don't like Russia. They wanted to isolate Russia and neutralize Russia for a while. And that could be because they further down the road, the idea is to go to war with China. And if you're going to go to war with China, the first thing you got to do is neutralize Russia, because they're the biggest threat. If Russia and China teamed up, I mean, would already give us a fight, or give the U.S. and like NATO a fight, or U.S. and whatever you want, whatever the group would call themselves. They probably call themselves the Avengers or something because they're douches, but they would form an alliance. It would be the nation of bad guys that they would be fighting. And you wouldn't want Russia and China teaming up on
And
the
that
Axis
could
power.
happen. That could happen.
Right.
That's
so I think
who
that
are we
they're trying,
really? Yeah, looking.
right.
At.
I think they're trying to neutralize Russia so that they can take China out down the road. And I don't know. I mean, China's got to know this, or I mean, they've got. I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm pretty sure China's got smarter people than me, anyway, in the government over there, and that they could easily, especially not ones with brain injuries like I have currently, that could think and come up with this stuff. So if I can come up with this, I'm pretty sure they know this. You know
It's
what I mean?
repetition. We've seen this before. We've seen all of this before, and we've watched ourselves getting goaded into these wars, as you talked about, Popeye. We've been talking about this. Look at what happened in Vietnam. When we went to Afghanistan, it was originally with the intent of taking out 100 Taliban terrorists. 20 years later, we left all those people there after all that trouble. We should have been able to negotiate a much better situation. Look what's happened in Iraq. Look what happened in Vietnam. Every time we get a flag-waving hair up our area, then the next thing you know, we're off to a war situation. But there's something else we ought to bring up a little bit about this. There's an ideological battle going on here. Russia is not taking the jab, Popeye. As a matter of fact, the Greek Russian Orthodox Church has spoken out against it. While we've poisoned our own troops, their troops aren't taking it. What's the problem there? See, they're not playing along, apparently.
Apparently I heard that Russia and China didn't mandate that their troops take the vaccine, yet we did. So why are we weakening our own men and women? Why would we do that? Why would we weaken our own forces for down the road and continue to require them to take the shots? And then anyone that wouldn't take it, you purge. They're literally purging people from our military right now for not taking a vaccine while they're picking a fight with Russia.
I know 2 of them.
I'm not making this up. I'm not
no, it's real.
If I had told you this years ago, right, people would have been like, "You're crazy, dude. That's not happening." No, we live in clown world, and it's going on. The Biden administration, just so you know, is the Obama administration 2.0. So the same people that were trying to, had an agenda when Obama was the president, they're the same people that are behind the scenes pushing the same agenda now that Biden is the president. Joe doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he went off script the other day, and Jill Biden came over and grabbed him and walked him away. And if you look at their interaction, you can see her correcting him, after they walked away, she's like, "No, Joe, no," and reminding him of what he's supposed to do. She's his handler. ladies and gentlemen, I don't care if you think it's cute. Oh, it's cute. His wife, she loves him. Isn't that sweet? He's old and she takes care of him. That's great. That is sweet. But not for the president of the United States. Hello?
Yeah.
Do you want your world leader to be seen as weak?
Yep.
No. He doesn't project strength or courage or any of that. But again, he's not in charge anyway. He's just a puppet to appease the people here at home. It's the people behind the scenes, and I really think they're trying to isolate Russia. And what better of a way than to sacrifice the Ukrainians? And I say this not when I say this, you have to put yourself in their shoes, okay, and think like they would. Why not sacrifice the Ukraine and drag him into a protracted war where if he invades, say Putin does take Kiev and he takes all these other cities, he's then got to occupy it. Taking a city and occupying a city are two totally different things. And as we found out in Iraq, it ain't so easy. Okay. Yeah. And if they're already putting up a stiff resistance, do you think that if they were being occupied, there wouldn't be an insurgency and a long, protracted war? There would be. And it would be a meat grinder for the Russian military. And what have some of our politicians come out and said in the past few days? That, it's if Russia invades, they're going to come in, and other people, quote unquote experts, all different people have been saying this. I keep seeing this from different people. If Russia invades and occupies, it's going to be a meat grinder for their military due to the insurgency. And so they're already predicting it because they want you to have that in your head because that's what's going to happen. Then weapons will be funneled through Poland. They could easily come right through the border of Poland into the western half of Ukraine.
That would spread the war. Yeah, it would actually
spread it. Then they can spread the war. And then what happens? Then maybe Russia says, hey, you're funneling an insurgency. You're killing our troops. And maybe they reach out and they do something. And NATO can use that then as an excuse because an attack on one is an attack on all, remember?
Right.
And I want to go back in history too, Steve, because when Gorbachev, when, the wall came down and, the Soviet Union and Reagan and everybody, sat down and, they ended the Cold War, so to speak. More crap. But anyway, Gorbachev said, look, we'll give you back Germany. You can unify East and West Germany again. That's fine. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, right? Fine. You can tear down that wall and we'll unify Germany and let Germany be Germany again. Because Germany was Germany. And then, there was a fight over who got Germany and who got Berlin. We wanted to let the Russians take Berlin. Patton, there's a lot of stuff that happened during World War II. Patton was pissed off. There's a reason they assassinated him. He wanted to go to war with Russia right at the end of World War II because he knew they were screwed militarily. They had been they were already almost defeated. And they were using ox cart to be able to reinforce their lines with weapons. I'm not kidding. And they had to use our weapons in many cases and our stuff, our equipment in some instances. And then at the end of World War II, we were getting in fights with the Russian military. There were dog fights between American planes and Russian planes and skirmishes between infantry units where American soldiers killed Russian soldiers and Russian soldiers killed American soldiers. Oh, you're not taught that, are you? Oh, no. How about the over 20,000 prisoners of war that Eisenhower let go back to Russia as slave labor? He wasn't the president, but he was one of the high-ranking generals that was there at the time. He could have said he was in charge of the invasion. He could have said no, right? He could have let Patton go in and do his thing. And Patton ended up kind of going in and doing it anyway. And without the support he needed, the raid wasn't as successful as it should have been. But they knew where there were prisoner of war camps that were holding American and British troops. And the Russians had, quote unquote, liberated them from the Germans. And in turn, they wanted to keep those prisoners of war and take them back to Russia and use them as slave labor. Because remember, they had decimated Russia. So they needed labor to help build Russia back up. They needed slave labor. And they needed, they needed these men. They needed the manpower. So they took the prisoners of war, Americans. I don't know how else to say it other than it was Americans and British soldiers, men, prisoners of war, are men who signed up and joined to go fight and beat Hitler, and go fight the Japanese and free everybody, and, freedom, and we're going to kick their ass, and, eat good versus evil, just like you see all the propaganda now. Those young men, everybody, those prisoners of war, they were shipped off to Russia, and our government allowed it. The president allowed it. Truman allowed it at the time. Okay. It was fine. Roosevelt, everybody, like, when Roosevelt was in office, he loved, not Teddy, his nephew. He loved Stalin. He used to call him Uncle Joe, even though whether he knew it or not. Gary Allen exposed this in None Dare Call It Conspiracy. Great book. I've mentioned it before. I played Gary on the show. I even believe Joe was mentioning him on the Freedom Link earlier tonight. And he discussed how the entire administration was just loaded with Russian spies. It was ridiculous. A great book. Go read it and read his other book. He's got a couple books like The Rockefeller File and a couple other books. Gary Allen, R.I.P., great researcher. Go look back in the archives for when I aired the audio from he gave a speech years ago. I think it was like late 70s, early 80s about this whole thing. Anyway, I think they're trying to drag Russia into a protracted meat grinder of a war, which then they'll funnel weapons to, and fund an insurgency and try to decimate Russia economically and also in the eyes of the world and make him look like a dictator and a bad guy. They've found it very useful to not only, they love assassination, like physical assassination, like, dead, right? Like what they did to Kennedy. They like that, Steve. But they like character assassination and this new thing of like depersoning. Now they've taken it to a whole new level of like they're like deculturing. So if you're Russian, you're evil now, which is don't you think that's racist?
Right.
Right?
Well,
isn't that almost like being racist on a national level?
Yeah, it's culture painting is what it really is. And what you're saying is very true there, because the values that the Russian people have now, a lot of it's changed quite a bit since what they had, what we need right here, actually what we need right here is what they had, which is called a glasnost, which means an open throat. That means they decided, let's get all of the lies out. Let's discuss what really happened with communism. Can we talk about 9/11? Can we talk about Oklahoma City? Can we talk about the JFK assassinations? Can we talk about the Federal Reserve? Can we talk about this phony vaccine that's going out, right? You see, the problem is here, we keep brushing all this blood under the rug here. Russia was one of the first nations to actually legalize abortion in 1920. Of course, you know what happened right after that. Stalin came in and it got really bad. Today, Putin is saying we don't need abortions. It's not about the law. We need the people. Come on, let's take care of ourselves and let's raise our children for a change. As Putin talks about when he says our values are different. That word values is much bigger than you realize in terms of the Russian ideology. He has grown in popularity since all this started. Yeah, there are a lot of people that don't like him. I've talked to some Russians about it. And they'll tell me some things. And of course, yeah, he's got a bad background with KGB. His mother was lying on a pile of people who they thought were dead or dying of starvation when his father found her and realized she was still alive, nursed her back to health, and she was the one that gave birth to Putin just a few months before Stalin died. His father was Stalin's chef. He was Stalin's chef. Okay, that's a pretty important position because you got to eat, and it's got to be not poisonous. And so, for a long time, Putin had a pretty good upbringing. He got involved with Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the book about the Gulag. And he was a pretty good friend. I think the value situation. Now, here's the question, though. This is the real question that we should ask, I think, Popeye. Is Putin for real? Does he actually want the best for Russia? Is he willing to negotiate and create a better world? I think Putin is a businessman primarily. He wants to have a better working situation. But they have developed very, very high-tech nuclear weapons. when we created our ABM, which is nothing more than Tomahawk missiles full of a bunch of BBs, really, to shoot down their missiles, that was against the START talks initially, which have come to an end, by the way. We haven't been able to negotiate anything with them all this time. Trump was talking about that. Trump and Putin seem to get along a whole lot better than what's happening right now, because they're both businessmen. They said, look, let's make it work. Let's make the best situation. Let's keep our borders. Let's make sure that, we're aware of the dangerous side of where this can go. Well, when they got Trump out of the way and they accused him of being involved with Russia, remember that? Even though Hillary Clinton sold all that uranium to Putin under Uranium One, and who handled the deal? Robert Mueller. Okay, you got all these scumbags, these globalists and elitists in the way. Now, I don't know whether Putin is for real or not, and of course we talked about the whole Putin psychotic situation that could be there with where he may be really wanting to go. I don't think he wants to go into Poland. I think he'd like to end this war very quickly, but on his terms immediately. And I think
he said what caused the aggression. See, the American media, you don't, and people, if you don't, now you don't have access to RT. People are like, well, that's great. They cut off RT and then RT closed the RT America offices. No, that's horrible. Because regardless of whether or not they're putting out Russian propaganda, at least you're going to see the other side of what they're saying to their people. We don't know what they're saying now, but I can tell you that, most people didn't even know, even when RT was up or Sputnik or any of them that you could watch or get a hold of. People didn't see what was being said. When you could pay attention, people weren't paying attention. But Putin has repeatedly said over the years, there's a line in the sand. See, when going back to when they unified Germany, because I got sidetracked for a minute there, but when we unified with Germany back in the 80s, okay, they took down that wall, Gorbachev said, do not, and this is a quote, I'll reunify Germany, but NATO is to not extend an inch east. No more. You guys you can have Germany. West Germany was already, part of, it was free. It was part of the group. It was part of NATO, but East Germany was not. So now that you've unified Germany, now the whole country itself as one solid country. You can unify Germany. He knew that they would unifying Germany would mean that the border of Germany would now be considered NATO. But he said specifically not an inch further eastward.
Right.
Meaning, do not bring any more countries into NATO. And what have we done since? Bill Clinton expanded NATO. Right. Every president has been just, edging forward. Oh, we have to. We need NATO. NATO was originally, the way it was sold was that it was to prevent the spread of communism westward through Europe and to stop the Soviet Union.
Right.
And so NATO had a purpose, but when the Soviet Union fell, then NATO should have disbanded, right? Because the purpose for it's picture NATO like a toll booth.
Right.
And they put up a toll booth in the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. When I was a kid and they built that, the selling point was, well, we're going to put the toll booths on it, but after the toll booths pay for the construction, we're going to take the toll booths down. And then they just never took the toll booths down. They kept moving the goalposts, and for the reasons as to why the toll booths need to be up there. And you know what? They're still up there to this very day.
Sure.
So, over 40 years later, they're still up there. So it's just an example, but it's the same thing. And they want to keep moving the goalposts. Well, we need NATO for this, or we need NATO for that. Now, don't even get me into the whole Gladio network and all the fake terror bombings that actually came about from NATO. You look up Operation Gladio,
right,
ladies and gentlemen. There's a couple books on it. They're very thick and in depth, and I suggest getting whatever information you can on it. In fact, I'll probably do a whole show. I should just do a whole show about Gladio and the Gladio Stay Behind Network, as it's called. And there's a lot of terrorist bombings that have happened over the years that were done on purpose, and they were done by this Gladio stay behind network, so to speak. Anyway, and it's all linked to NATO. So, and all of this is because there's a political agenda, right? So anyway, Russia does not want NATO on their back door. And I mean, I can understand how would we feel again if Russia and Cuba are friends. What if Putin and Cuba decide that they're gonna, the new leader in Cuba, whatever I don't know what they call. I guess they call him the president of Cuba. So we'll just call him the president of Cuba, El Presidente over in Cuba. Yeah, all right. And I don't remember the new guy's name now that the Castro brothers are completely out. But say him and Putin sit down, and they're like, "Hey, you know what? We're friends." And Cuba says, "You know what? You can park some of your ships over here with nukes on them if you'd like. Come on, you can bring some of your troops too. Come on." Well, that would be kind of awkward, right? Because we're going to be like, "Hey, Florida's 90 miles. 90 miles. Key West is 90 miles from Cuba. 90 miles, less than 100 miles, ladies and gentlemen. That's not far. A lot of people are like, 90 miles is far. No, it's not. 90 miles is not far at all. Not in this day and age. 100 years ago it was. In this day and age, 90 miles is not actually that far. And in terms of lobbing missiles, not far at all. By the way, Russia's not that far either. It's right off the coast of Alaska. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm.
These are hypersonic.
Watch,
hypersonic missiles that are much faster. We're talking about right now. You see, that's what Russia built. They could not keep up with our ABM system, so they decided we're going to go aggressive. The United States and NATO violated their agreement. They won't come to the table about it. They're setting up an ABM. We've had this balance of power working, so what we're going to design are missiles and aggressive weapons that their ABM can't stop, and they have them. They have the supersonic gliders. They have these hypersonic missiles that are much faster, and they don't want NATO missiles on their border 5 miles away, because if one of those things gets loose and somebody makes a mistake, there's a problem. They don't have the correction time.
They don't trust NATO.
Yeah,
and see, that's where the argument comes in, because then they say, well, why don't you? This is where NATO's like the used car salesman. Why don't you trust me? Well, I would never do anything. I would never. You guys have expanded. You keep asking countries. You're trying to force Ukraine into NATO. NATO's never going to accept Ukraine, right? It's not a realistic thing. So why would you push something that you know is going to piss Russia off? And that's why I've been looking at this whole situation, and I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. And then you see the initial invasion force. If you believe all the videos and stuff, obviously, I mean, there's some soldiers that they're crying and stuff, and they're like, we didn't know. We were told this was going to be this was going to be a drill and stuff. And perhaps some of them were told that. So that way there was, nothing got out. Remember, compartmentalization. Every man knows what he needs to know to do his job, and nothing more. You don't need to know anything outside of your pay grade. So, and Russia does the same thing, and they're even worse about it. So a lot of those guys probably didn't know. They probably, some of them probably did think that they were just going on drills, the initial guys. And that would have been cannon fodder. Those are the guys that they send up to the front lines to get shot and engage the Ukrainians, and then they allow the special forces or the heavier hitters to come in. Now, which you saw, because when a couple of days later, then all these different caravans of special forces units were coming in. But there's something that hasn't been explained to me, and I'm just going to put this out there because this is something that I find interesting. So there's all these columns of armored vehicles that are blown to hell, and it reminds me of the Highway of Death in the first Gulf War, where the U.S. Air Force just rained hell down upon Saddam's forces on Highway 1, and they blew the crap out of it. And it was just, look up the Highway of Death from Iraq, and you'll see the video footage still. You can find it out there before they, memory hole that, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And the footage coming out of Ukraine reminded me of the Highway of Death and that footage. And you see this for a couple of days, and all they keep saying is Ukrainian forces, took out these columns of armor. And I'm looking and I'm like, I don't see any bodies. So obviously they've they've pulled the bodies, they've cleaned it up somewhat. They might have left debris laying around, for effect, but the bodies are gone. Now, I'm not saying that it's fake. I mean, they obviously somebody cleaned the scene up, meaning they pulled the bodies off to the sides so that they could shoot images of it or take pictures. But in some cases, you may see bodies laying around, but like in the columns of vehicles that are just, there's like a half a mile of armor and that's all blown to hell. You don't see, like dead troops laying on the ground and things like that. And I can tell you, if you've ever seen real war footage, especially from like Iraq, where it was a lot of urban combat like this, you'd see a lot of bodies and stuff. And I don't see that. So the area has been somewhat changed from the, obviously the fires are all out and it's just some of the stuff may be still smoking, but for the most part, the big fires are out. But what I don't see is lots of shells. I don't see spent, I don't see like the Ukrainian forces standing around, like holding up a flag or, all happy about it. I don't see any soldiers. I see some civilians, but I don't see a lot of soldiers. And you see a lot of civilians milling around.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at the destruction of these columns. And of course the media is like, well, there's from Molotov cocktails, Popeye. No, that doesn't look like a Molotov cocktail hit that thing. Okay. And so then for a couple of days I was like, wow, that's weird. And I even said to Tina, I said, it's kind of odd. It's like they were hit by an airstrike, but you don't see any drone footage of airstrikes. I don't know if the Ukrainians have drones. And if they do, I don't know if they're capable enough with their drones or if their drones are capable of doing the precision strikes that our Predators would do. But this looks like something that you'd see because dropping a bomb on a target may sound relatively easy, but it does take practice. And this equipment is, these guys practice with it. So our fighter pilots are very good at what they do when it comes to putting a bomb on target. And so are the drone operators, the people that, there's two people that operate the drone. There's one that operates the drone and the camera, and then there's the other one, the gunner. And I think the gunner actually operates the camera, and then the other one is, flying it. So sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's a two-man crew. But they train, they fly, and they know how to hit a target from the air. And those columns looked like they were hit from the air. So then about 3 or 4 days into it, I see this footage and I see, the Ukraine military is using drones, and they're using drones given to them by Turkey. And it was in the Daily Mail. And I see this. And again, I'm taking everything with a grain of salt, just taking in the information and then sorting through it myself. And I'm looking through this article and it shows this drone. And it's a Turkish drone, and it's the Ukrainians using it, but it's stock footage. It's from, months, or I think it was from like 2019 or whatever, whenever they got the drones from Turkey. So it wasn't from recently. And they're saying, oh, look at the drones that they have. So it was like setting up, like how they were going to defend themselves. And then the next day, supposedly there's drone footage that came out that was from them, of the Ukrainian military hitting, doing drone strikes on a column of vehicles, except that wasn't, it was apparently from a Turkish drone. So you see how the story was set the day before, but it wasn't the Ukrainian military. It was like a Turkish drone being used to strike ISIS in Syria. And of course you can't tell that in the drone footage because most of it's like that IR footage. So it's kind of looks black and white like night vision does, right? So it's hard to tell what it is. And all you really see is a column of vehicles and something get blown up. But this was another, like the ghost of Ukraine, another piece of propaganda fakery where it was, oh, look, they're doing drone strikes. And it came out, no, that actually that footage isn't from that. It's from, Turkey and, fighting using a drone in Syria against ISIS. So then, okay. So that was propaganda footage. I get it. Why would they put that propaganda story out and use that and say, look, that's why those columns were blown to hell? Because probably people are having the same questions I have about why those columns look like they were blown to hell. And I don't see any spent shells. I don't see any evidence from those pictures and videos of those columns that there was infantry or light armor that engaged them, any form of ground forces whatsoever. And if anyone's ever seen a ground engagement on a convoy on a road, you know exactly what the hell I'm talking about. It does not look like it was it doesn't look like it was any type of ground combat at all. There was no engagement, to me, involving, and I could be wrong, but from what I've seen, and then maybe if I get better angles, better footage, but from what I've seen of these smoking columns, you know, they took out supposedly the Chechen fighters, the hunters that they were sending to get Zelensky, the ultimate fighters. They had video of them praying on their mats, because they're Muslim. The Chechen fighters, and these are the same guys that Russia used to hunt down ISIS in Syria, and now they were supposedly getting sent into Ukraine, and they were getting decks of cards. I love that. Supposedly they were getting now I don't know. Again, you don't know that because we don't know their side of the story, but they were getting decks of cards with our military, with the Syrian militaries, the heads of the Syrian military and government, you know, specific people to take out. And people are like, my God, that's dastardly. Those Chechen murderers. I have a deck of cards from Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 that were given to us, and they are the same thing. All the branches of the military, everybody was given these cards. It was just a thing, and it was propaganda is what it was, but everybody was given them. They were decks of cards, and the deck of cards had all the different, you know, generals and, you know, whoever in the Iraqi military or government, their faces on there, and it was different people, and this was an American thing. So, and doesn't that sound a little weird that the deck of cards thing is now suddenly the Russians are giving the Chechen fighters decks of cards to take out the Ukrainians, and then their column was destroyed in the same fashion. And again, supposedly, and again, like when you see smoking, hulking wreckage, it doesn't look like it was a ground engagement. It looks like something came from above. And I still haven't seen any credible footage of any airstrikes. So how are they hitting them? If they're hitting them, I mean, if you could hit them with javelins, Steve, and javelins, you know, they go up in the air and then come down, straight down on top of the target. So, I mean, yeah, sure, you could hit them with javelins, but that would be still a ground engagement, and you'd have infantry, and you would think that there would be at least one soldier, one person in fatigues with a gun around the wreckage, and there's not. It's always after the fact. You can't see the bodies, you know, whatever scattered bodies have been dragged out, whatever bodies were inside. If they weren't burnt up, they've been dragged out, and it's just empty, burnt up wreckage. It's weird.
Looks weird. Could be all fake for all we know, because
so there's that too. So what's your take on it then?
Well, there could be some special weapons, possibly chemical, maybe the DEWs, you know, directional energy weapons and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, it's really questionable, everything that you're seeing here. The big problem, of course, is that people are under such propaganda. You know, everybody rooting for the Ukrainians and their resistance are actually, I think, rooting for their destruction. And eventually it's going to come home to the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the price of gas. The price of food is heading up. Here's just one sideline. We get a lot of our liquid nitrogen fertilizers from Russia. Farmers are already telling us now they can't pay the price for the fertilizer for our crops here in this country. You're going to see bread going way up, wheat, corn, everything like that. We're having all kinds of problems. Why are we shutting down our own oil right now so we can buy from Russia? I mean, there's so many crazy things that are happening that are all about really destroying us with this war. We don't even see it. We don't see what's happening. And getting back to the vaccine one more time, you know, when you think about the fact that we've already destroyed a good portion of our health care backing, our reserves, our money, our funding, and a lot of people are going to keep getting sick because this thing is a long-term slow kill, ladies and gentlemen. Popeye and I have covered that. I've been tracking Fauci for 30 years. I'm telling you, this guy's a maniac. We should have never let him be around this long and keep doing these kinds of things. Klaus Schwab, the internationals, what's happening is what they don't want people realizing what happened right now with the vaccine. So they need a distraction. They also got all this inflation. They got this maniac who, for 4 reasons should not be president. Not any of them have anything to do with the election. We call it high crimes and treason. We call it bribery. We call it, every other factor, Amendment 25, which was tailor-made for Joe Biden. Before the election, then you can look at that, and we've done that before too. There was no reason why Joe Biden was even vetted to be president. Now the Durham report is coming out. All of that was declassified before the election. It should have been prosecuted in September of 2020 at the latest at any event. So our country is in a real mess. We are actually pulling ourselves down by this. I think the best thing to do for the Ukrainians right now is come to terms quickly with Putin and let's put an end to it. Because if this drags on, it's going to get worse. And like you said, if Russians are in the streets and they're attacked, I don't think there's going to be much mercy for civilians there. See, this is the big problem that I fear for those people. I don't think they have a chance of getting out of this mess right now. Putin is saying that he will not tolerate a no-fly zone. That's going to, I don't know if you've seen the Su-35s. His jets are far superior to ours, friends. They are way ahead of us. And Putin has made that claim, and he's not boasting and he's not trying to threaten. He says in many areas we are far more militarily advanced than the west of the U.S. is right now. Not all, but in many.
Well, they could easily shoot down planes coming over Ukraine because they'd have to fly them in from another country. And what he's saying is if somebody else flies into Ukraine to form a no-fly zone, those planes will not be flying out of Ukraine. They'll be flying in from another country, and that constitutes an act of war.
That's right.
And they are correct. They are 100% correct. And for us to act like, well, we need to do something. See, they're pushing the emotional argument, Steve. We need to go in and fight. We need to do it right now. We need to fight. And that's why you see people, literally the people that were the same people that were ready to round their neighbors up and force them into a vaccine concentration camp are also the same crowd that is buying into we need to send troops to go fight for Ukraine. No, we do not. I've seen tweets from people like, nuke war or no nuke war, it doesn't matter. We need to go in and bomb Putin and show him who's boss and restore order. And it's like, dude, do you even know what you're talking about right now? Shut your mouth. You don't even know what you're talking about. You have no idea about geopolitics. Shut up. We don't need another war. And there's people with Twitter blue check marks, which really means nothing in the real world, but in the social media universe, that's a thing. And there's blue check mark Twitter douchebags that are running around. We should start World War III, Steve. Let's do it. Yeah. Let's start World War III.
Yellow and blue freedom fries. Yellow and blue.
Yeah, with our yellow and blue. Well, it's freedom fries with yellow and blue. Especially yellow and blue ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise. It's all yellow and blue to support Ukraine. We're depersoning Russia. Do you think that's gonna bode well? No. And they have nukes. Well, they'll never use them. There's people that are like they won't use them.
Right.
You're gonna back them into a corner. How do you think a cornered animal reacts?
Right.
If you tank their economy and you destroy everything, and they have nukes and they have nothing left to worry about losing. The most dangerous man, it said, is a man who has nothing left to lose. Well, and when I say man, I mean like human, not anybody, man or woman. It could go for either way. So the most let's say the most will be 2020. Hold on. Let me rewind and be politically correct. I'll put my political correct filter on, Steve. Okay. I meant to say person. I'm kidding. Yeah. Kidding. I'm being sarcastic. But if you back anyone into a corner, human or animal, what do you think the response is going to be? It's not going to be a good one. It's not going to come out well. I'm not in the government, and I could tell you this right here now while doing this radio show with you on a Saturday night. I'm pretty sure the people in the upper echelons of government know this, right? I'm not like some prodigy and some Nostradamus type individual,
It's
some
politics.
prophet pulling things out of the ether. This is easy to understand stuff. So if you and I can get this, if the listeners can get this, then the people in power have to understand this, dude, which means there's a reason they're doing this. And the only thing I can see, and I've been really wondering, I mean, there's, Putin looks stressed, right? And who knows what's going on from their aspect. We're only seeing whatever propaganda is being fed to us, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even if it's, people, I'm seeing it on Twitter. It doesn't mean it's real. It could be a bot. It could be an account that was made purposely to put up disinformation. I mean, that kind of stuff happens. There's a famous picture of the Air Force, and this goes back like 8 or 10 years ago. And it's they're in a room, and there's a couple people in the room, and you can see they're in full military, full Air Force uniform and everything. But up on the screen is like 8 or 10 different profiles that are different fake profiles that are on Twitter. And then one screen has Facebook and stuff. And whether or not somebody photoshopped it or it was real, the point, and it supposedly was real, but the point is that exists. They have that. They have people that their job is to sit down at a computer all day, and they're either an airman or a petty officer or a private, whatever branch they're in, whatever their different rank happens to be, or their rate is. Their rate is usually going to be IT, and their job is to sit and have fake accounts and go online and be trolls. I mean, and now they have computer programs that can do this stuff. So they've even, the technology has advanced. But back in the day, they used to be able to, when you'd be fighting with somebody online, I used to tell people all the time, don't fight with the trolls. Don't feed the trolls, because most likely that troll could be somebody sitting in a room somewhere that's getting paid to do just that and waste your time and to sidetrack you. So if they have that capability back then, imagine, look, that's why you see this level of propaganda you see now, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not only trolling you, they're identifying you is what they want to do. And you're right. I get too involved in arguing with people in comments, and I should stay away from it. But the bottom line is there's a lot of stupid people out there, and this is a huge psyop, ladies and gentlemen. What these things are, the fright of the vaccine, or the fright of the COVID-19, which requires the vaccine and the lockdown. Have you ever seen anything so stupid? 99.73% of the people have survived this thing. And the people that they were killing, and I know people personally who have survived with ivermectin and other means without this vaccine. I have not taken it, but these people who have taken this terrible jab, this is not a vaccine, friends. This is an experiment that you're giving yourself to. This is how bad the United States really is right now. This is how much under this influence of what I would call just basically demonic hypnosis that we're living in. Tim Allen, I like Tim Allen, but, I have to tell you a quick story if I got just enough time. A friend of mine that I know pretty well grew up with Tim Allen here in Denver. They were kids together. Tim's dad was killed. His name was Dick. Actually, Tim Allen's name is Tim Allen Dick. His dad was an attorney, very prosperous kind of guy, killed out on the highway. And then they moved to Minnesota. They remained friends after all this time. And he says Tim's always been a fun guy, but, he's changed over the years a little bit, and he's kind of forgotten his friends and his roots and stuff like that. He had to do some time in prison, as you know. He's had a rough time. But on the other hand, he thinks, and what he's listening to right now, when he wants to support this war, is that, the Tim the Tool Man kind of attitude. I mean, he's the kind of guy who is really interested in wanting to see us exert some sort of a collective team pressure on all this stuff. But my friend that I know got himself in trouble, ended up in the military. He was in Southeast Asia after Vietnam was over, in places like Cambodia and Laos, an ops that most people don't know about, Popeye. He says, I've seen war up front. You don't want to see this. The guy is bothered. I mean, he's got the post-traumatic stress. And, He's a nice guy, but you can tell he's really permanently scarred from what happened to him as a young kid. So, I mean, the bottom line is there's a comparison between the two of these people. People have seen more. Look at John F. Kennedy had seen it. Eisenhower had seen it. I mean, you have people like these chicken hawks like Lindsey Graham and so many of these other people who are making big money on these military contracts wanting to incite us into this kind of a thing right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a really bad demonic influence is what it is. You've got to pay attention to one thing. Don't be deceived. There is so much deceptive information out there. We talked about the vaccine. They know much better about what's going on in Russia and in China than we do. That's why they're not giving their troops this terminally toxic jab, ladies and gentlemen. We are being poisoned. We're being destroyed. We're the ones that are the victims. You're going to see that. It may be Ukraine today, but you're going to watch and see this kind of stuff taking over on us next. And just like Popeye said, what if China and Russia team up? They could do that very easily. As a matter of fact, they've got more interest. They fought wars among themselves. They have a balance of power on the borders. Putin said we need a balance of power, Popeye. He was saying we've got to have these superpowers in balance or things are going to get out of control. Well, what is NATO doing? Continually tinkering with this stuff. And you've got a real Nazi, a real thing, George Soros. He helped ravage houses of Jews with the Austrian fascists. He's a Jewish man himself, and he was actually turned on his own people.
He's actually proud of that. Somebody asked him that. There's a video.
Steve Propp.
Yes.
On 60
he
Minutes.
actually brags about it. He was asked about that in an interview, and he was proud of working with the Nazis.
Yeah.
He said he's proud of it. It was like one of the best times in his life. But he's just a horrible, horrible human being.
He's filthy.
And what they do is the way they muddy the waters is that, like the Q garbage psyop, your garbage wasn't picked up on a Tuesday. It's George Soros's fault. And, that's the kind of, they label everything as Soros, and then it muddies the water and people, okay, that's crap. It's fake or whatever. But no, he really is he's a turd of a human being. It's why he's as evil. You notice the older these guys get, their inner evil oozes out of their skin. It's like their human suit can no longer hide the inner reptoid. And it just oozes. Brzezinski was the same way.
Yeah.
In his last couple of years, he looked, that's why I said I call him Nosferatu. Because he'd come in to talk to, Obama, and he would float through the door.
God, yeah.
He was just, that guy was evil. But I wanted to share this with you. So I'm always scanning, when we're talking about a live subject like this or a fluid subject that's, ongoing as we're talking about it. I was scanning Twitter while we're talking. I can still do a couple things at once, which is good. I'm not as fast as I was, but I can still do multiple things at once. Once they draw a hole in the back of my head, I think I'll feel a little better. And no, I'm not being facetious. They're actually going to do that. Anyway, I see on Twitter that First Squawk is a financial Twitter account. They discuss they actually here I'll read you their description of themselves. Their description is First Squawk is a global financial news squawk service specializing in financial markets. Anyway, they were retweeted by Jack Posobiec, and he put, so they're admitting that's how it works, which it's a good point, Jack. But the information that First Squawk put out is New York Times sources. Washington and its allies consider securing a successor to Zelensky if he is killed or arrested. So that's what he means by saying, they're admitting to that's how it works. Because we've said this for years. That's what they install people in as the leader or the president. So if Zelensky's killed, then they're already figuring out behind the scenes who they can have as his successor, and then they'll prop him up and say, well, this person is the true leader of Ukraine, and Putin is whatever, and and then they will use that they will take that successor, okay, and they will. Remember, I said they would use that I was talking about insurgency. Well, that's what they'll do. They'll use that successor to fund said insurgency, meaning he'll be the head of it. We have to fight, and then he'll be the rallying guy. And they've done this before. This isn't their first rodeo. They did the same thing with Diem in Vietnam, and then when things didn't work out, they assassinated him and brought somebody else in. I mean, that's just the way it works. When that's how they do, so to speak. This isn't their first rodeo. There's nothing new under the sun, and we've done this time and time again. Now, the Obama administration were the ones that were the same people that were in power now, like Victoria Nuland. I keep bringing her up for a reason. They were all in power. Her and others were in power when they overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine. They put in Poroshenko, and that guy was a gangster. And the other thing, I got sidetracked with this earlier too in hour one, but here's the other point of why the Biden administration would allow Ukraine to be used as a meat grinder, so to speak, because people would say, well, okay, so maybe they're trying to. You're right. Maybe they're trying to drag him in Brzezinski style into this civil war, because now they're gonna. If it turns into an occupation, it'll break out, and you'll have violence, and you'll have an insurgency, which will then then they say Russia installs its own government in there, and then you have a civil war like what broke out in Iraq. And of course, by the way, we actually fomented that civil war for years and kept fueling it because they, for Halliburton and for money and, for the meat grinder that they needed over there in the Middle East and in Iraq. It's a whole side issue. But, by the way, 19 years. Next year is the 20-year anniversary since we invaded Iraq. Right. 19 years since we invaded that country, and they still have problems. And we just literally we got out of there not too long ago. And believe me, if we could get back in, if the government could get us back in, they will get us back in under any pretext they can possibly use. But right now, everything is being focused on Russia. And I want you to think, ladies and gentlemen, the military for like the past year and a half has been openly and very admittedly changing the way that they train. They were training men and women for years to fight terrorists, to fight insurgents, to fight in like a guerrilla style war. And now they're training, and they have been training to fight another military again, like you would if you were going to face off against the Russians. And they use Russia and China constantly as examples of this. So the military has already been doing this. So knowing all of this stuff and understanding all of this, that's why I came up with that hypothesis that they're going to try to drag Russia into a meat grinder of a fight in the Ukraine. And they're gonna make it just. They don't care if they grind the Ukrainian people or Ukraine down, and especially the Biden administration won't mind, because people would say, "Well, isn't he cozy and buddy with them?" Well, not if you want to hide the evidence. Yeah, of course they'd let. I mean, if all those government buildings are getting blown up and chaos and mayhem is happening, do you think that people are going to be able to find the evidence that would tie Hunter Biden to any of these shady deals, or Joe Biden to any of these shady deals? They won't be able to follow the money. There's so much. War creates chaos. And I'll tell you what, that chaos that's created by war has been used multiple times in the past by many people to hide things. So why wouldn't the current administration use that as an advantage? I'm not saying that's why they're doing it. They're doing it. The goal is to drag Russia into a protracted war of occupation. They're just like they did in Afghanistan. Okay. I think they're trying to do it with the Ukraine and with that situation and with Russia currently right now with what you see. And I think the Biden administration is just a secondary win-win for them, because all of the corruption, all the evidence of their corruption will be destroyed in the chaos that is war and occupation.
Really is bad. And the one thing that just comes to mind, why can't the United States mind its own business? Why do we have to feel like we have to intervene in some situation like this? Because we're prompted, just like we've been talking about all through the show, Popeye. We're being pushed and prompted and K-holed into these things, and we have our own country falling apart, and we're supposed to be protecting Ukraine's borders. What about ours? Look at the inflation that's hitting us. Friends, I'm telling you, this is going to start hitting home a lot sooner than you realize. Look at your gas pump. I mean, it went up 35 cents today just down the street from me. Prices are going up. Dollar store is now $1.25. You know, what used to cost you $7.27 is now $10.40 because you're paying the tax too on that increase. Friends, this is coming down. We're going to have people sick. We've got this incredible disaster. We can't stop that. I'm not trying to be a negative person about, creating this tidal wave of horrors. I'm just saying that we've got to grapple with what's real here. We can't let the damn media control our lives anymore. People have got to wake up, Popeye. They've got to wake up now. When I count to 3, you'll wake up and realize you've been lied to. 1, 2, 3. Now see, it wasn't that bad. You can't.
Bro, if you don't want, all I'm gonna say is this: if you don't want World War III, why would you send Kamala Harris as your envoy to stop like potential World War III? Because the other option is the guy that can't tie his shoes. Good job. Everybody was upset because of mean tweets and a bad toupee.
Yeah.
So because you were upset over mean tweets, that's great. Now gas is like $4 a gallon. We're about to get involved in World War III. Here's the Rabbit Hole Radio golf clap for you. Steve, we are at the end of the broadcast already. I'm looking at the clock.
It's been great. Hey, one more time, tell people about your website. It's beautiful. I've been there. It's great.
Well, yeah, see, I'm horrible at self.
I know. I got to prompt you to do it. Go ahead.
To remind me to do this.
Yeah.
All right, tv.rabbithole.radio. So
beautiful.
tv.rabbithole.radio. And as I render more video archives, I will get them up there. And that's specifically just for the show archives. So you can go watch them and share it around. It has to be up there because I get blocked everywhere else. And I just didn't feel like having it on 7 different platforms. And when you're on a metered network and you only have a certain amount of limited data per month to deal with, you don't want to be down or uploading things 15 times, the same thing 15 different times to 15 different places. So if you just go to tv.rabbithole.radio, bam, you can see all the archives of the shows in video format. And I suggest you go over to KGRA, get a subscription, show this network some love because they gave me a home. They gave the Freedom Link a home. They're giving a lot of people homes, and they're really good. They take good care of us. Bill's an awesome guy. He works his butt off to make this network run the way it does. And he doesn't make money. He's not the guy that like makes any money. He's actually an employee. He's just running the network. But by you going and getting a subscription to KGRA, you help them do all this and give me this airtime. So I'd appreciate it if you did that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we got about 30 seconds left. Steve, you want to say anything really quick?
Hey, I just wanted to thank Bill and the network. And I got a buddy named Thurick J that Popeye knows. We got to hook them up together because we're going to build this thing out the way we can go here. And let's just do that. Go to Popeye's website. Thanks so much, Popeye, again. I really appreciate it. We'll do it again real soon. Bill, thank you, and everybody at the network here.
Yeah, Steve, thank you for coming on, my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, as I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are most definitely an